The 14th world champion, one of the greats to have ever played chess, the man who dethroned Garry Kasparov, was here on Samay Raina's YouTube channel on 22nd of September, and he played a wonderful game against the team of comedians Samay, Biswa, Vaibhav and Upmanyu. All of them teamed up together to play against Vladimir Kramnik. Now, what was the handicap in this? Because, of course, if they played a normal game, nothing, there was no chance. The handicap was that the comedians took 1 hour on the clock and Vladimir Kramnik had 5 minutes. But as it was told to the comedians later, that when they were thinking, Vladimir was also thinking. So actually it was not really a handicap. It was a normal game where 5 minutes were more than sufficient for Kramnik to play his best chess. But what was very interesting, and that's why I made a video on this, is that the game is very educational. There's a lot to learn from this. And so here we begin. D4 is how the comedians began. They were all discussing with each other and making the moves. So that's how they played knight f6. And this was their idea, to play the London system, to play a system which is so solid that maybe Kramnik would not get through it. But Vladimir immediately surprised them with the move c5. And I think this is a very good try for black. After a lot of discussions, the three moves which were being discussed was c3, e3, and finally Abhishek Upmanyu suggested that d5 is what seems right, and they went for it. I think e3 is interesting, and after queen b6, which is the main idea of c5, you go knight c3, and this is the pawn sacrifice which should be looked into, although here also black seems to be doing pretty well. d5, and now Vladimir played the move b5. This was one of his games against Gata Kamsky, and white players were thinking, can we go knight c3, then after b4 we'll jump to b5 and give a check on c7, and that would be very dangerous. But then Kramnik told them, guys, I can just go d6 here and you will be lost. So that's why knight c3 was left out. And after a long thing, they found the move a4, which is very impressive for the comedians, because this was the same move that Gata Kamsky played against Kramnik in his game that was played several years ago. Now, Kramnik did not remember what he had played in that game, but he had gone for bishop b7. And here, white has a very strong move. So I would like you to pause the video and try to think, what should white play? Okay, if you took on b5, that is not the great move. That is what I think Kamsky did, and then he lost this pawn on d5, which is a good trade for black. The best move here is e4. You defend this pawn, but what about knight takes e4? Well, now the d5 pawn is safe, and you can take with the pawn or also the bishop, and this gives you a very good position as white. I think after ab5, white is just better. So in the game, instead of e4, d6 was played, and this was already a mistake, because after e into d6, bishop takes d6. Here a into b5 was relatively better, but they took, and queen takes. And you will see that while black has already developed two of his pieces, white has simply exchanged the piece that he had developed and got his queen out early. Vladimir played this nice move, queen b6, and this is where the thought process was like, oh, we're playing the world champion, how about exchanging the queens and going into the endgame? Would we have better chances? First of all, Kramnik is a great endgame player, but second of all, they have a very concrete problem on the a file, and so they cannot play a into b5. Queen e5 check was played, and now black responded with the move king to d8. Now, what's the point of this move? Well, the point is that black wants to get his rook into the game. Now normally you would expect that here black would go for queen e6 and a queen exchange. While this would have been okay, it leads to a position where after takes, a b5, white wins a pawn. And so Vladimir played king d8, and also he's a big adherent of the no castling chess variant. He's the one who had suggested that, and it's nice that he got to play king d8 in the game. Knight f3, rook to e8, and now queen to g3. If you look at queen g3, it does attack the pawn on g7, but it also leaves the queen side sort of empty now, and Vladimir took advantage of it by taking the pawn, and now b2 is hanging, and it's so soft that you cannot defend it. That's the problem. As was rightly pointed out, that rook a2 is met with bishop d5 attacking the rook, and it cannot be saved. The b2 pawn cannot be saved. Here there was a nice variation that was being discussed, that rook takes pawn, queen takes b2, and now rook takes a7. The idea being, if you take this rook, I'll take on b8, but of course the comedians were missing that there's a mate here. So this didn't happen, luckily. Knight bd2 was played, and after queen takes b2, once again rook d1. If you play rook b1 trying to win this bishop here after queen c2, you still cannot take it because there's a checkmate. Rook d1, and now the move that was made was knight to c6. I think knight e4 was better, trying to defend this g7, keeping this g7 pawn in check so the white queen cannot take it. And after takes, it's like a normal position where black is 2 pawns up. The king is pretty safe here, and this should be easily winning. But I think Vladimir was, this is what I liked about this game, that Vladimir tried to complicate it so that it remains interesting for the viewers, but he also had to take care that he doesn't complicate in a manner where he loses control, because such positions, when your king is on d8, something could go horribly wrong. So he went knight c6, and now e3. You could take the pawn on g7, but after knight b4, this king is feeling the heat. c2 is hanging, and it's just losing. So e3, the idea was to meet knight b4 with bishop d3. And here once again, I believe knight takes c2, bishop c2, queen c2, queen g7, and now a very strong move, queen g6 would have ended the game. And this is what Vladimir would have played in a professional game. But here he was here for fun, and he played the move c4, kind of complicated things in a very nice manner. Knight takes c4, queen c3, and this is the moment where the comedians started thinking about all the candidate moves that they had at their disposal, bringing the knight here, king e2, king f1, rook d2. There were so many possibilities that they were discussing, and finally they tossed the coin between knight d2 and king e2, and finally they played knight d2. I think king e2 was also a very interesting move, because the most natural try here, which is knight takes c2, actually fails after knight d6, and this gives white, in fact, even very good position, because you are attacking two pieces and suddenly the king is safe. Everything is working out well for white. But bishop a6 is the winning move here, and I'm sure that Vladimir would have spotted it. Knight d2, now take on d3, pawn takes, queen takes, and after queen takes g6, g7, we reach a very, very complicated position. There was also a discussion that knight d6 might be a good move here, but after bishop a6, as rightly seen by the comedians as well, queen f3, trying to attack the rook. Well, if you take on f7 after king e7, you not only are getting checkmated here, but also losing the knight, so you are losing the game. Queen f3, here comes the interesting moment. You take the knight, take on a8, king e7, come back, and after king f8, you will see that this bishop is cutting across the position, stopping the white king from castling. Black has his king safe, and this pawn is running down the board, so this is winning position for black. Yeah, it's nice to see how you can sacrifice material and still get a winning position. Queen takes g7, and now queen to c3. I like this move, and in fact this is one of the two winning moves. Knight d5 is also winning, but queen c3 is nice. And here the comedians got very excited. They were like, oh, we can castle now. That would be so cool. Now our king would be safe. His king would be weak. Kramnik had said at the start of the game, guys, I'm not going to allow you to castle, because here you can spot the winning move, right? Rook to g8. And then you lose g2, and that is game over. Knight d6 was played. And now I would like you to pause this video and think for black side, from Kramnik's side, what is the move that you would play here with black? It's important to look at this move carefully, because look at this. This is hanging. This is hanging. f7 is hanging. Too many problems. Well done if you spotted rook takes e3, because now you must take the rook. If you were to play king f1, then check, king g1, and now I just move my king to c7. You see, two pieces which were hanging, both moved out with a check, and then everything is fine for black. F takes e3, queen takes, king f1, and here Vladimir had a bit of fun, you know. He gave a check, then gave another check, then gave a check. He was trying to, but I think here it was, instead of taking the knight, he should have given one more check, forced to king e1 or e2 somewhere, and then he should take it, so that white is not so well coordinated. In the game, after he took here, there was a chance for white to play knight to f3, I think. And then after check or queen b6 check, there's rook d4, and I feel like the position is too complicated, like knight e4 check, king e3, and things are going out of control. I know that after queen c5 check, black is still better, but it's no longer very simple. It's quite complicated. Instead of knight f3, also queen g5 is possible, and a possible variation is to go into this endgame where black is better. But queen h8 was the final straw. It was the big mistake, because after king c7, what they thought was, oh, we have rook c1, and they got so excited because if king b6, there's knight c4 picking up the queen. But bishop c6 was an excellent move by Vladimir, and when they picked up the rook, Kramnik took the knight, king g3, and he gave a check. And I think here came the best move of the entire game by the comedians. Samay offered a draw to Vladimir, and the world champion gracefully, graciously accepted it, and the game ended in a draw. But of course, after king h4 check, it's a checkmate. So it was a mate in 2, but the result is a draw. I must say that this game was very, very impressive by Vladimir. He made it exciting. He also took risks, minimal risks, in a way where, you know, things were under control, but at the same time gave some chances to his opponents. I sort of felt it was like a pro driver driving on a cliff, where he knows just the right amount of acceleration and things to be done to stay on course, not to go off the cliff. And that's how Vladimir played this game, with such control and excitement. And also kudos to the team of comedians, Samay, Biswa, Vaibhav and Upmanyu. They all played very, very well. They gave the world champion a tough fight. But next time, as Kramnik rightly pointed out, they should not be putting up games like 1 hour against 5 minutes, because when they think, the world-class player is also thinking. So he doesn't really have a time odd. Maybe something else should be thought of. But for now, this is Sagar Shah signing off. I hope you learned from this game and also enjoyed it. Bye-bye.